This is Ashton Hall, and he's known for being a fitness influencer and having one of the best morning routines in the world.
So looking at it, bro, we gotta go ahead and get in at least 10,000.
You see, recently Ashton has gone viral for his use of banana peels and ability to manipulate time. But although Ashton Hall is currently living the good life, at one point, he used to have bigger dreams. Because it turns out that Ashton Hall was once a really good running back in high school. But back then, he wasn't doing all the right things to get better, and he never got a chance to live out his true potential on the field. So today, I am putting Ashton Hall into College Football 25. Let's see what would have happened if he locked in just a little bit earlier, as well follow him on his road to glory. Now, coming out of high school, it was very important to Ashton to get better and one day make it to the pros. The thing is, though, he was not highly recruited going into college, and no matter where he chose to go, he was going to have to work his way up regardless. But he was deciding to go wherever he felt like he can get the chance to play sooner. So when it came to Ashton Hall's college decision, he decided to sign with Akron. Now, going into college, Ashton Hall felt like he was locked in and ready to go. He was out there at practice doing pretty well, but the coaches definitely saw that he had a lot to improve on. So they decided to make him the fourth string halfback, and it looked like he was not going to see the field at all his first season. He was missing out on a big chunk of games, and during this time, he wasn't doing nothing about it. This man was just scrolling through Tinder, he was late on his bills, and he was trying to play some video games, but he was trash at that too. Just see, one day Ashton realized that he had to make a change. So now he decided that he's going to wake up early in the morning, do some push-ups, do whatever this was, and whatever that is, and it was going to help him on the field. Because the coaches had noticed an improvement in not just how he played, but also his physique. In just a couple months, this man gained 40 pounds of muscle. And although he would still go on to sit out a few more games, one day at practice, the coaches really began to see the true potential in him. And by the end of it, they had no choice but to move him up to the third string halfback. Now, he still did not get much of a chance at all to play in the next game, but going into the following week, he was now getting a chance to be the backup running back. And with Ashton Hall now seeing the importance of dipping his face into a bowl of ice filled with Saratoga water, this man was going crazy in practice. So the coaches had seen enough to decide to make him the backup running back for the rest of the season. As a true freshman, Ashton Hall had locked in, and he's finally earning some playing time. After 10 weeks and a surprisingly impressive winning streak from his team, Ashton is finally going to get a chance to make an impact on this offense. And his first opportunity will come in his next game against Buffalo. Ashton Hall was finally making his college football debut halfway through the first quarter. And on his very first carry, he takes his handoff and fumbles the ball. Now luckily he does pick it up, but the coaches immediately take him out. But when he got back in, Ashton was not feeling too bad about his mistake, because he wasn't the only one fumbling. But later on in the first, he would get another chance to make an impact, and not only was he coming up with his first career catch, but did you guys see that? It went from 1 minute to the end of the first quarter while he was in the air. He literally jumped at 136 and he didn't land until 140. He different. His morning routine has allowed him the ability to manipulate time on the field. And because of that, I think that's why the coach decided to put him down at the goal line, where he takes his hand off to the outside and gets in for his first touchdown of his career. A big score that actually gets his team the lead late in the third quarter. And I don't know if you guys see that right there, but he's actually telling people that we gotta wake up at 350. That's what he's trying to say right there. But after Akron's defense comes up with a stop, Ashton's score actually turns out to be enough to put this game away. Akron goes on to win this game 21-17. And Ashton Hall had a pretty good game as he got his first touchdown of his career. But a lot of people were still talking about that play where he jumped over a guy. I mean, they just couldn't believe that he was in the air for 4 minutes.
I kid you not, bro. I was really in the air for 4 minutes.
And it's probably because of that play that the very next week, Ashton was now getting a chance to be the starting running back for the Akron Zips. And in practice, man, he was going crazy. I mean, he was out there trying to get at least 10,000 on every play. So after an incredible day at practice, Ashton Hall had now earned a spot as the starting running back for Akron. But going into the rest of the season, he was still looking forward to working hard on his skills. And he would have to in order to help keep his team's winning streak alive. As in their next game, Akron was heading on the road to match up against Northern Illinois. Now on his first carry of the game, this man got dropped in the backfield for a safety. A horrible way to start this game as his team soon goes down 5. But they were starting to fight their way right back as they were heading downfield. And towards the end of the first, things were looking great as Ashton was getting a lot of yards on his carry, but then the linebacker such a block and made him fumble. But you know what, actually, when you take a closer look at it, it looked like he did that on purpose. Y'all see that right there? See, he threw the ball because he knew his teammate was going to get it. You see, Ashton Hall, he's just different. And that's why he earned himself a touchdown at the end of this drive, getting in for the first one of the game for his team to make the 7-5. Now, when Akron got the ball back, it wouldn't be long before they would start driving back downfield, but they would eventually get stopped on third down in the red zone. But on the following drive, after they got some help from the defense by getting a pass interference, they had a little bit of momentum going after that, and Ashton Hall was taking advantage. He got his team down to the goal line with 11 seconds left in the half, and he actually made a catch over the middle for a touchdown that extends his team's lead further. Akron was coming out in the second half up 21-6, and they were not showing any mercy on the opening possession, as they had unleashed Ashton Hall on this defense, and he was pretty much single-handedly working his way downfield for his team. He got him all the way back down to the goal line to set him up with another score. And after on the very next play he jumps in for the easy touchdown, he had done enough to help his team win another game. Akron goes on to win this game 31-12. It was actually a game where Ashton goes on to win player of the game for the first time, as he went for 162 yards and 4 touchdowns. An incredible performance that earns him MAC Player of the Week. But you see, Ashton still has a lot to improve on, man, so he's still out there working. He knows he has a lot of responsibility as the starter now, so even though he makes some mistakes from time to time, he's going to keep working through it and try to help his team come away with another win. As in their next game, they're heading back on the road for an in-state rivalry against Kent State. Now, this game did not get started off well at all, as Kent State was not only up by 7, but they also caught a pick on Akron's opening possession. And it did not get a whole lot better towards the end of the first quarter, as the quarterback got sacked, fumbled, and then Kent State picked it up for a touchdown. So this was about as bad of a start as you can get, as Akron was now down by 14, but at least in the second quarter, Ashton Hall was starting to get things going for them. He helped to move his team right towards the goal line, where on second down and goal, this man was able to dive in for a touchdown to get them back in this game. Because after they got the ball back in the second half down by 7 points, they now had a chance to tie it up. But after failing on another third down, they go back down 14. And things are definitely not looking good for Akron before the quarterback throws a dime to a receiver, coming up with a score that puts us back at a one-possession game. And now in the fourth quarter, Akron's really having a chance to tie it up after they get the ball with great field position. On first and goal, he was able to take this handoff to the right side and get it around the edge for a touchdown, finally tying this game back up at 21, and he was waving to the crowd of approximately 0 people to rub it in. Because when the offense got the ball back still tied, Ashton was out there saying, "Shablock, get off," and coming up with huge plays to move his team downfield. Man, this dude Ashton was absolutely different. And after he stiff-armed this one dude to the dirt on third down, he moved his team in field goal range and had finally done enough to put this game away, as Akron goes on to squeak this one out 24-21. And Ashton Hall goes on to win another player of the game with 142 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, earning himself another MAC Offensive Player of the Week, but unfortunately he had not done enough to earn his team a spot in the playoffs. But with only 1 game left in the regular season, it turns out that Ashton Hall is actually doing a lot better than the other running backs. The coaches realized that Ashton was not just a better player, but he was just overall better prepared, because he knew about Ashton Hall's morning routine. But it turns out that every football game, including their next one against Toledo, is just another routine for Ashton Hall. You see, by 12 o'clock, this game finally begins. By 12:33, this offense may not be able to get nothing going, but that's all good because by 1 o'clock, you better believe that they are now. At 1:03, Ashton Hall is taking his handoff to the right side and running into the end zone for a touchdown. And at 1:23, Ashton Hall was out there saying, "Hey," breaking a dude's ankle and picking up a first down. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't know what's going on here, but that's... Hey, yo. At 1:25, though, right before halftime, Ashton is also saying "Shablang" and moving his way across the goal line for another touchdown on the day. And by 2:57, he was taking the handoff to the right side before disappearing to the shadow realm and then reappearing on his way towards the end zone for a touchdown. And now by 3 o'clock, he had finally done enough to put this game away. 22nd ranked Akron goes on to close the season out with a 21-14 victory. And once again, Ashton Hall had done his thing with another 100-plus yard performance and 3 touchdowns. This dude was really starting to make a name for himself as he got another MAC Offensive Player of the Week and even helped get his team into the MAC Conference Championship. And it was a game that his team was going to have to win if they had any chance of making the college football playoffs. Luckily, though, all that ice water was helping Ashton improve on his skills quickly. So going into the conference championship, this man was locked in and ready to help his team come away with a victory against Miami of Ohio. To start this game, this offense was moving swiftly down the field, and it was largely due to Ashton out there saying, "Give me that," taking people's ankles on the way for a first down, and then taking a reception on the way towards the end zone, getting in for a score that gives his team the early 7-0 lead. But things would not stay looking good for the offense, as they would end up getting stopped on third down, and eventually they would end up getting the ball backed up on their own 1-yard line. So in the biggest game of the year, man, Ashton Hall realized that his team needed him. So he decided that he was going to go out there and say, "Hey," and then just run away from everybody. Man, there was nobody that was going to catch Ashton Hall down the sideline as he raced towards the end zone for a touchdown. He was getting in for a score that extended his team's lead right before half. But after halftime, with the offense not playing as well, Miami would eventually find their way back in this game. Leading us to the fourth quarter, where on this 3rd and 4, Ashton was doing enough to move the chains with a first down, but almost gave it away with a fumble. So the coaches actually decided to take him out. But after Miami fails to score any points, Akron goes on to win the MAC Conference Championship, finishing this game off 17-14, and it was actually a game where Ashton Hall goes for over 200 yards rushing. An incredible game where he also went for 90 yards receiving. But after winning the conference championship, the regular season is now over, and it is time to give out some awards. It turns out that not only the head coach, but the offensive coordinator goes on to win a coaching award. They definitely did a good job with this team even before Ashton Hall started playing, so they for sure deserve those. Now when it comes to the Heisman, it turns out that Shedeur Sanders goes on to win. And that was pretty cool, but what was even better was the fact that Ashton Hall went on to win first team All-MAC. He had rushed for 690 yards and 9 touchdowns in just a handful of games. For a freshman, this was pretty astounding, which is probably why he went on to win Freshman All-American, and after earning his team a bye week, it turns out that he will have a chance to play in the college football playoffs. So Ashton Hall is about as locked in as he's ever been throughout his entire life. This man had NFL dreams. And after starting out as only a 3-star recruit, by the end of his freshman season, he was proving to be capable of leading his team to the playoffs. But now it's just about whether he can lead his 1-star program to a win against one of the best teams in the country. As in the first round of the playoffs, Akron is set to face off against Texas A&M. Now Akron had actually come in this game as the 48-point underdog. Pretty much everybody thought they were about to get their cheeks clapped to smithereens throughout this game. But with the help of Ashton Hall, man, it did not look like that was about to be the case early, as he helped lead his team all the way down to the goal line, and on 1st and goal, he was able to dive across for a touchdown, putting the first points on the board in this playoff game as he puts his team up by 7. And it would be a score that they would get a chance to extend after they get the ball back in the second quarter. It did look like they were on their way to doing that before the quarterback throws a pick, taking points off the board that definitely would have helped the team, and now they were heading into halftime down by 3. Things weren't looking too bad at first as Ashton was able to pick up some first downs, but ultimately it was starting to look like Texas A&M's defense was way too much for Akron, because they would end up getting stopped on 3rd down, and now late in the 3rd quarter they are down by 10 points. And if it wasn't for this play on 3rd down and 4 where Ashton Hall comes up with a huge reception as he's breaking off tackles and moving his team well across midfield, then Akron may have already been out of this game. But Ashton Hall was out there single-handedly making plays that were not only getting first downs but touchdowns, getting in for a score that brings his team back within 3 points in the 4th quarter. But after Texas A&M scores a field goal, now Ashton Hall is having to come up with some big plays all throughout this drive. One here on 3rd down that moves his team deep into enemy territory. And now here on 4th and 5, he is having to come up with another big play where somehow he's able to make the catch. He is keeping this game alive for his team. And now with less than 10 seconds left, the quarterback trusts him again as he gets in the ball and he gets across the goal line for a touchdown. Ashton Hall has scored a touchdown with less than 10 seconds left in this playoff game, giving his team the lead and doing enough to send Akron to the next round. Akron goes on to close this game out 21-20, and it was a game where Ashton Hall did not have his best performance for sure. Well, at least as a runner, because as a receiver, he had 18 receptions and almost 200 yards. That's probably why Akron went on to win their first playoff game in school history, led by Ashton Hall, who wins his first National Offensive Player of the Week. But now, heading into the next round of the playoffs, it looks like this matchup was about to get way harder. So Ashton Hall was out there preparing with another nice little morning routine for me. He was doing his thing because he had to get prepared for the biggest game of his life. Akron was about to head into a game where they were bigger underdogs than they were the last game. But on the bright side, they had a chance to make history. The only way they do that, though, is if they find a way to come away with the win in their next game against the Oregon Ducks. Now to start this game, the Akron Zips were playing well initially, but by the end of their opening drive, it was 3rd down and they were getting stopped. And if it wasn't for Oregon giving great field position on their next drive, Akron would probably have 0 points after they get stopped again on 3rd down. Now, eventually this would be a game where Ashton Hall would start getting things going, and he even brought his team deep into opposing territory all the way down to the goal line, where on 1st and goal he takes his handoff and just powers his way through for a touchdown, getting in for a score that ends up being huge for Akron as that puts him up in this game. Unfortunately, it would not last long, as not only would Oregon score, but they were out there playing some of the best defense that Ashton Hall had seen all season. He had nowhere to run when he ran, and when he caught the ball, he still really had nowhere to go with it. So by the 4th quarter, Akron would find themselves down by 2 possessions and trying to find a way to get back in this game. Soon though, man, it was less than 2 minutes left, and Akron was down 28-13. Ashton Hall was still out there coming up with some big plays, moving his team downfield, even getting them to the 2nd and goal where he gets in for another touchdown on his season, breathing a little life back into this game as his team's only down 1 possession. But after Oregon continues to pick up first downs, they just kneel out the clock and put this game away, as Ashton Hall's freshman season officially comes to a close with a 28-20 loss. But in a season where he started off by doing all the wrong things, he can't be too upset about ending it off as a starter on a team that made the playoffs. But despite the fact that Ashton had a pretty solid game, he's watching Oregon go to the next round, and it's time for him to move on. Ashton Hall would close the season out with 787 yards rushing with 11 touchdowns, but that would also go with 631 yards through the air with 8 extra scores. Overall, an incredible season for Ashton Hall, and I think at this point he realizes that he deserves better. So going into the offseason, Ashton Hall has decided to enter the transfer portal, where he's going to have a lot more options to choose from than he did as a freshman. So Ashton Hall's definitely going to have some decisions to make, but I'll leave that decision up to you guys. The last time we saw Ashton Hall, this dude was a dog for the Akron Zips. He was literally out there defying the laws of physics. And although his team did not get much support early on, Ashton Hall would eventually lead his team to the conference championship, where he absolutely dominated, not only earning himself Conference Player of the Year, but he also led Akron to their first ever college football playoffs, where he ultimately led them to a 1-point victory over Texas A&M. And although Ashton would continue to do well against Oregon, Akron would go on to lose in their next game, putting an end to an incredible year for them and an amazing individual season for Ashton Hall. Which brings us to today, where Ashton has to think about his future, man, because although he likes Akron, that boys was weak. So he has to take a look at the transfer portal to see what teams actually want him, and I'm not gonna lie, man, it did not seem like there were many. Even after an incredible season, Ashton Hall was not getting a lot of love from around the nation. But there was one school that Ashton felt that he not only had a chance to play, but also win a championship. And it was quite literally the only school that would give him that opportunity. So for Ashton Hall, this one was easy. When it came to his sophomore season college decision, he decided to sign with Clemson. Now, when he got to Clemson, the school did not have his number 21, but it was all good because they actually wanted him to wear number 1. Some of the coaches truly felt like he could be their future over the next couple seasons, which is probably why immediately they wanted him to be the starter. And as soon as he got to practice, he was showing exactly why he deserved that spot. And after balling out all day, they would officially make him the number 1 running back for Clemson. Ashton Hall had a plan to get to the NFL, and it was working, mostly because he was sticking to his morning routine. He was doing whatever he had to do to get prepared for his first game of the season. As now that he's with Clemson, they're about ready to head into their first game against top 25 ranked LSU. To start this game off, Ashton Hall is getting stopped in the backfield, so he definitely felt like he was going to have a much tougher season. But on this third down, they hand the ball off to him, and he runs through a few people for a first down. Unfortunately, their opening drive of the season would not end in any points as they got stopped on third down. But now down by 3, these Clemson receivers started to make some plays to get them all the way down to the goal line, where on first and goal, Ashton Hall was able to dive across for his first touchdown of the year. He's already started to make an impact for his new team, and it continued into the second half, where after coming up with this catch, Ashton is able to bring his team within goal-to-goal territory. And it would only be a play later where they hand the ball off to Ashton, and that boy gets suplexed into the end zone for a touchdown. He's already coming up with his second score of the season for Clemson to help push their lead to 2 possessions. But the way Clemson's offense was clicking all throughout the game, Ashton didn't really have to do too much as they would make their own way across the goal line for another touchdown. And this score on third down and long would actually be enough to put this game away, as Clemson was coming up with a victory in their first game of the year. And it was largely led by Ashton Hall's 110 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And that was definitely a great game to start his sophomore season, but the coaches wanted to see more. So he accepted the challenge of having a better game the following week, and he prepared for it the best way that he knows how. Because this next game is actually supposed to be an easy one, where Clemson gets to stay at home and face off against one of the worst teams on their schedule, Troy. Now to start this game off, Ashton Hall is actually asserting his dominance. Like, I've never seen that before, but that's crazy. Now Ashton Hall was running wild on their opening possession, even getting his team inside goal-to-goal territory. But unfortunately, his quarterback was throwing a terrible pick that would definitely take some points off the board. But now down by 7, man, Ashton Hall is not having that. He went out there and said, hey. See one guy coming towards me, walk right up to him and said, excuse me, get off. And all of a sudden, this man Ashton was out of there. This man just put the whole team on his back in one play, and the entire stadium began to fall in love with Ashton Hall. Unfortunately, the next drive would not end nearly in the same way as they got stopped on third down. Now in the second half, Ashton would continue to try to do his job, but by the fourth quarter, they were now down by 10. And the quarterback was out there throwing another interception that was now making this comeback infinitely more difficult. Luckily, though, this Clemson offense had some serious playmakers, and all it took was one catch to this receiver who took it upfield for a touchdown. Nobody was catching this man for a score that was bringing the team back within one possession, but by the time they got the ball back, Troy had not only extended their lead, but the quarterback throws his third pick of the game, and his turnovers alone had done enough to give Clemson their first loss of this season. They would fall 26-17 against the worst opponent on their schedule. But it was a game where Ashton Hall did play pretty well, going for over 100 yards, and on top of that, he was gaining a lot of respect from around the nation. He was even able to get an NIL deal signed with Saratoga Water. They were going to give him a bunch of free bottles so he could stay prepared for his morning routine. But at this point, Ashton is looking forward to moving on from the previous loss and hopefully help his team bounce back in another home game against Syracuse. Now to start this game, Ashton realizes that his quarterback has not been following the morning routine, man. This dude has thrown 4 picks in 2 weeks, so on the following drive, Ashton Hall has to save the day. Ashton wasn't about to let his team go outside like they did last week. So after he made this catch, he said, "Hey, block him. What you doing? Get off." And this man was picking up a crazy first down. Unfortunately, this drive would end in 3 points as they got stopped on 3rd and long. And I wish I could say the next drive got better, but the quarterback was throwing his 5th pick in 2 games. This dude was garbage, man, so the coaches realized that they had to rely on Ashton. But eventually, Cade Klubnik would finally stop trying to impersonate Josh Rosen on the Cardinals, as he ends up making a play that actually gives Clemson a 3-point lead. And in the second half, with the help of Ashton Hall, they were able to chew out a lot of this clock and eventually even get up to the goal line where they would score another touchdown, finally doing enough to escape this game. As Clemson closes this game out 17-7, but it turns out that there was some drama behind the scenes. You see, Cade Klubnik was telling the coaches that they think Ashton Hall's morning routine is stupid. It's cringe as hell, and he don't even care that he went for over 140 yards and a touchdown, because ever since the coaches forced Cade and Ashton to be roommates, Cade can barely even get any sleep. Man, he just wishes Ashton would go back to eating watermelon, scrolling through Tinder, and being trash at the game.
Hey,
Can't keep doing this, bro.
break it up, bro.
So the coaches decided that they were going to move Ashton down to 3rd string. They didn't want his morning routine interrupting the process of their quarterback no more. So in their next game on the road against Colorado, Ashton Hall was benched. This dude got absolutely no playing time, man. They didn't even have him travel with the team. But after seeing how trash the other running backs have been, the coaches realized that they had to get Ashton back involved or else they'll lose against better teams. So Ashton was out there still doing what he had to do and setting an alarm for 3:50 because the next day he had a chance to move back up the depth chart. And even though he kind of felt like his team had turned their back on him, he still went out there and balled. He wasn't going to let this stop him from making it to the next level. So at this point, he was just looking forward to his next opportunity to play in his next game against SMU, where crazy enough, they are not putting Ashton in until the 2nd quarter, but he was still out there doing his thing. And although they would take him out immediately, they would eventually put him back in on 2nd and goal, where Ashton Hall was plunging his way across for a touchdown to tie this game up for his team. Still though, the coaches decided to take him out and not put him back in until overtime, where on 2nd and 7, Ashton Hall would take this handoff and power his way into the end zone for another touchdown. And it was actually a score that helped his team put this game away. Clemson would close this one out 27-24. And although the team was happy about the win, the fans were still pretty upset that Ashton Hall was not the starting running back, even going so far as to fundraise a billboard just to show support for Ashton. But for the time being, it seemed like the coaches wanted him to remain as a backup, and he would do so going into the next game against Florida State. But once again, it was another game where Ashton barely got any opportunities. He did play pretty well when he was in, though, and he was actually able to witness one of his teammates go in for a touchdown in the 4th quarter as they take the lead, a score that ultimately did enough to win another game for Clemson. They squeaked out another victory by 3 points. And it was after this game that the coaches realized that they don't know how much longer they can go without one of their best players in the lineup. So the following week, Ashton Hall was finally getting the chance to earn back his starting spot. And after going out there and doing everything that he had been doing over the past couple seasons, it was obvious who the starting running back should be. And Cade Klubnik was just going to have to deal with Ashton Hall's morning routine. But at this point, Ashton knows that he now has a lot of work to do to catch up with the top rushers in the nation. I mean, he's even sitting right behind Trevor Etienne, the brother of the man who is the greatest running back to ever play for Clemson. But now that Ashton Hall has his starting spot back, he's hoping he can make his way towards the same level of success as Travis Etienne. But in order to do that, he's going to have to take care of business in his next game against Boston College. Now finally back as the starter, Ashton Hall was back to making plays that moved the chains for his team. That man was out there saying "hey" and breaking off a big run that would put his team inside the red zone, where a couple plays later he was catching the ball on the right side and taking it upfield for a touchdown. His first one since being back as the starter, and he feels like he's going to have many more throughout the rest of the season. And he actually gets another one later on where he jumps over a guy into the end zone. Probably one of the best plays of his whole career so far, and even Boston College was cheering for him. Unfortunately though, Ashton forgot to stay in the air for 4 minutes, and Boston College was able to use the time to come up with the score. So in the second half, Ashton Hall was trying to come up with some big plays, moving his team well past midfield, but it wasn't his fault that he had big back McGee over here getting called for holding. Clemson though would keep moving down the field. And after Ashton Hall comes up with another catch on the outside, he gets another score on the day. He was putting his team up by 2 possessions, but soon, Boston College was finding a way to tie this game. But now late in the fourth quarter, off the back of Ashton Hall, Clemson was moving their way downfield well into field goal range, and Ashton Hall had got them in a position to put this game away, as Clemson would just barely escape this game 24-21. And it was a game where Ashton Hall had absolutely put the team on his back, going for 196 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns. And in a season where his team seemed like they turned their back on him, he was definitely going to take the credit for the wins when he can. And it seemed like a lot of people agreed that he was the reason for their success, as he was drawing a lot of comparisons to another Ashton named Ginty. These are 2 guys who absolutely terrorized defenses while in college. But Ashton Hall still has a lot of work to do to live up to the legend of Ashton Ginty. So in order to do so, he's going to have another great game in his next one against Duke. Now early on in this game against an ACC opponent, this Clemson offense was rolling, making it down to the goal line early on where it did not take long for Ashton to just barely make it over it for a touchdown. A score that would set the tone for them for the rest of the game, as they would eventually get the ball right back. And in a game where it seemed like Duke had no intentions of trying to tackle Ashton, it made it a lot easier for his other teammates when they got their opportunity, as one dude was taking a screen pass and taking it all the way to the crib for a touchdown, extending Clemson's lead to 3 possessions. And if that was not good enough, Clemson was still nowhere near done yet, as in the second half, Ashton Hall was getting across for another touchdown at the goal line, doing more than enough to help his team put this one away, as Clemson goes on to blow out Duke 34-10. And shout out to Ashton Hall for having another great game, going for over 100 yards rushing. Now at this point in the season, Ashton is just continuing to do what he's always done to make himself great. I mean, he's so in tune with his morning routine that he actually decides to take some of it to the field, as he's about to start wearing a long nose strip, maybe even change up his helmet and some other drip too. Because going into the rest of the season, Ashton Hall knows exactly what he has to do to get himself to the league. He's going to have to get to over 1,000 yards on the season and help Clemson get to the college football playoffs. But in order to do that, he's going to have to help his team win their next game against Louisville. In another game that started off with Ashton Hall being somewhat of a goal line merchant, he scored a touchdown early on, but he was not finished. Because later on, after coming up with the catch, he would get some great blocks. And now all he has to do is just run down the sideline and dive into the end zone for a touchdown, already doing enough to win another game for Clemson. As they beat Louisville 27-10, Ashton Hall's stardom continues to grow as he goes for another 100-yard game. He would go on to win his first Conference Player of the Week, but he knew he had more in store for his next game on the road against North Carolina, where even though they were down by 7, Ashton Hall would still bulldoze through the defense for a touchdown, tying this game up. And now the tone was definitely set going into the second half, as Ashton Hall was still out there making some great plays as a receiver, helping to move the team downfield where he said Shabaka and crossed over the goal line for a touchdown. He was having a big performance in the game that was really close, but by the end of it now tied at 14, it was him who was now closing the game out, as he crossed over the goal line in the final minutes of this game to put this one away. Ashton Hall was an absolute menace on the ground, going for almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. But with Clemson now looking at an opportunity to close in on the top 5, all they have to do is just close their season out strong, continuing on the road against Georgia Tech. At this point, it seems like a weekly thing for Ashton to start the game off with a goal line touchdown. And apparently this one gave his team a ton of momentum going forward. Because although Georgia Tech was one of the top-ranked schools in the country, they did not seem that way when playing against Ashton Hall, as he was obliterating defenders on his way across the goal line. This man was absolutely different. And they wouldn't even be out of the first half before Ashton Hall was coming up with another catch, and then jumping over a dude for his 3rd touchdown of the game. Georgia Tech had no idea how to stop Ashton Hall, and he had already done enough to put this game away, as Clemson would go on to dominate Georgia Tech 42-0. And thanks to another great game from Ashton Hall, they are 1 game away from another conference championship appearance. The crazy thing is though that despite how well Ashton Hall has played throughout the year, he is still not getting any consideration for the Heisman. But that's all good, man. Ashton Hall doesn't need to win a Heisman. He just needs to be good enough to get to the NFL. But first, he has to help his team close out their regular season on the road against South Carolina. Now, for the first time all season, Ashton Hall had actually fumbled to start this game. And that definitely wasn't a great way to start, but he would make up for it in the second quarter with a touchdown. A nice score that gave his team the lead before South Carolina tied it up, so he had to get back to work. He ran a wheel route up the sideline and ended up making a catch for another touchdown. One of the easiest scores of the season to put his team up in this game. And by the fourth quarter, he was getting across for another touchdown to extend their lead to 2 possessions, and not only do enough to put an end to this game, but put an end to their regular season. As Clemson would close this one out 21-15, and it was actually the first game all year where Ashton was able to go for over 200 yards on the ground, ultimately doing enough to earn Clemson a chance for a rematch against Boston College, where if they win, they'll earn a first-round bye in the college football playoff. So now at this point, Ashton Hall knows that he is one step closer to pursuing his dream. But the good news going into this week is that Ashton Hall has already played Boston College, and he had no intentions of letting them ruin his season, so he just treated this game like another daily routine. By 7:43, Ashton Hall was taking his first handoff in this game, and by 7:44, he was saying shabow, throwing a whole grown-ass man off him as he makes his way up the sideline. Ashton Hall had taken his first carry of the game for a touchdown. But that was all good, man. That was just part of the routine. Because by 7:52, they were actually getting the ball back, and Cade Klubnik throws a touchdown, a score that put the team up by 2 possessions, so that by the time 8:05 came around, Ashton Hall could be out there jumping over dudes to pick up some yardage. And although he wanted to stay in the air for 4 minutes, man, he had to make sure that his team scored. But by 8:07, he was taking his handoff across the goal line for a touchdown, extending Clemson's lead even further, and at this point, it seems like Boston College has already given up. Because by the time that it's 9:28, Clemson is up by 31. And another catch and run by Ashton Hall that would get him across the goal line for a touchdown not only does enough to put an end to this game, but punches Clemson's ticket to the college football playoffs, as they shut out Boston College 41-0, and it was largely thanks to a 300-yard performance from Ashton Hall. An absolute dominant game that earns Clemson the title as the ACC champions. But now that it's the end of the season, it is time for the playoffs, but first, there's some awards to be given out. As not only does Ashton Hall win his first National Offensive Player of the Week, but he actually goes on to win Player of the Year. And after having an incredible season with 1,800 yards and 19 touchdowns, it turns out that Ashton Hall actually did enough to win the Heisman Trophy, becoming the first ever Heisman winner for the Clemson Tigers. Ashton Hall was definitely the best running back in college football, as he was awarded so. And he would also go on to win a bunch of other awards, but as great as that was, at this point Ashton Hall is now here for a bigger mission. He knows at this point if he just keeps doing what he's doing, he'll be able to get himself to the NFL. But for now, he also might have a chance to get his team to the national championship. But first, they'll have to take care of business against the best team that they've played all year, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Now to start this game, the Heisman winner was coming up with some big plays, ultimately getting his team down to the goal line where it did not take long for him to cross over for a score, putting the first points on the board for Clemson as he ties it up in the second quarter. But in a game where Notre Dame's offense was playing well, it's too bad that their defense was too, as Cade Klubnik throws a pick that goes all the way to the crib for a touchdown, extending Notre Dame's lead to 2 possessions. Now, things were definitely not looking good for Ashton Hall towards the end of the third quarter, but with his help, he was able to get his team right back down towards the 1-yard line, where a play later, this man tried to jump and got clobbered into the end zone for a touchdown. That probably hurt, but he was bringing his team back within 1 possession, where on the following drive, he was willing his team back downfield to a 4th and inches. And soon after, Ashton was able to bulldoze over a defender for another score. He was absolutely putting the team on his back in a game that they really needed him. But unfortunately, even though Ashton was playing well, his quarterback was not. And just like he had all season, he was throwing a pick that was probably putting an end to this game. Luckily though, Notre Dame did not score. And with time running out on the clock, Ashton Hall was helping his team get right downfield into field goal range, setting his team up with a chance to put this game away and move on to the next round. Clemson just barely wins this game 24-21, pulling off a comeback led by Ashton Hall, who went for over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was by far the most valuable player in the country. It was crazy to think that Clemson actually benched him at some point in the season. It is what it is though, man, and at this point, Ashton Hall is just ready to get into the next game and hopefully help his team get to a championship. After an incredible season, they are now 1 game away from getting to the Natty. And at this point, the only team standing in their way was Penn State. Now to start this game off, Clemson was down by 7. And Ashton Hall did not like that, man. He was out there stiff-arming this dude to the dirt for a first down. He was really out there setting the tone for his team as a receiver would come up with a catch and get across the goal line for a score, tying this game up at 7 in the second quarter, and the momentum seemed to stay in Clemson's favor as they would get the ball right back. And after taking his screen pass, he was able to find a bunch of open space where he read up and said Shablaka, and getting tackled in the end zone for a touchdown. A huge score that gives Clemson the lead going into the second half, where with the help of Ashton Hall, they were on their way towards extending it. This dude Ashton would take a handoff to the left side and say, "Hey, get off me," and power his way across the goal line for another score on the day. He had absolutely broken Penn State's spirit, and it turns out that this touchdown was actually enough to send Clemson to the national championship, as Clemson would win this game 24-7, and led by another 150-plus yard performance, they were on their way back to the Natty. It had been a long season for Ashton Hall, and he had a lot of up and downs throughout his entire journey. He knew that one day he would have a chance to get to a championship, but he almost still can't believe that it's finally here. Led by Ashton Hall, the Clemson Tigers are back, but in order to claim that all-prestigious trophy, they're going to have to take care of business in the final game of the year against the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, to start this game off, Ashton Hall was making an impact just how he had all season. Whether it be on the ground or through the air, he was going to come up with some yards to move his team downfield, where it did not take long for Ashton to come up with another catch as he jumped into the end zone for a touchdown. A big score that gave Clemson the lead before Georgia came right back down the field and tied it up. And I guess that might have scared Clemson's O-line or something, because for the first time all season, they were getting called for a false start. But that didn't even seem to matter though, as Ashton was not messing around, bro. He was determined to move his team downfield on every drive. And on this one, he was diving across the goal line for another touchdown, putting his team back up in this game, but it did not take long for Georgia to tie it right up again. But I'm telling you right now, bro, this just seems like a game where Ashton Hall is not taking no for an answer. Every drive, he's either running around you, through you, or just jumping over you, leading his team back to the goal line in the fourth quarter where his quarterback throws a pick. And now all of a sudden, things are not looking good for Clemson. It's getting to be late in the fourth quarter, but luckily Georgia does not go on to score, and Clemson gets the ball back. So now on a drive where Clemson has a chance to win it, Ashton Hall is determined to make something happen. So he goes out there ready to make a play before looking over at his quarterback throwing another pick. And all of a sudden, with Georgia damn near already in field goal range, it looks like this game is pretty much over. This was extremely disappointing. And it turns out that after Ashton Hall had an incredible season, he would get one more chance to make a play. Georgia's offense was not able to get nothing going, so Ashton told the quarterback that he better give him the damn ball. And after he does, Ashton Hall is going to work getting his team across midfield. And although Cade Klubnik had been ass all season, on this play all he had to do was just get the ball to Ashton Hall, and Ashton was making a play to get his team in field goal range, putting his team in position to score with no time left and win the national championship. Ashton Hall leads the Clemson Tigers to the top of the college football world. And it's crazy to think that there were parts of the season where this team didn't even want him. In the end, though, he turned out to be the savior as he led them all throughout the season. He had established himself as the #1 player in the country. And not because of him, Clemson was the #1 team. Now, Ashton Hall had an incredible game going for over 200 all-purpose yards, doing enough to finally earn Clemson another national title, where after the incredible season that he had, it seems like Ashton Hall is now the greatest running back in the history of Clemson, as he went on to break Travis Etienne's old record for rushing yards, and it actually turns out that he tied him for the most rushing touchdowns in a season in program history. But now that Ashton Hall is a national champion and widely considered to be the best player in the country, he has some things to think about. I mean, he appreciates Clemson for giving him the opportunity, but they literally benched him earlier in the season. And it was all just because a quarterback who kept throwing picks didn't like his morning routine. And since he knows that he's only going to play one more year of college football, he doesn't really want to spend it at a place that didn't even really want him. So going into the next season, Ashton Hall is definitely going to have some decisions to make. The last time we saw Ashton Hall, he decided to sign with the Clemson Tigers, and this man went absolutely crazy. He put his team on his back the whole season, eventually earning himself the Heisman Trophy. Now, he had also become a fan favorite not just because of his morning routine, but also because he was able to lead Clemson to the national championship, where in the fourth quarter, Ashton Hall got his team in position to kick a go-ahead field goal, and he had led his team to victory, establishing himself as the best player in college football and now finally a national champion. Which brings us to today, where Ashton Hall is heading into his junior season, and after contemplating hitting the transfer portal, he decided to stay, and it turned out to be a great decision, earning himself first-team All-ACC and second-team All-American, while also leading his team back to the college football playoffs. And like his two previous seasons in college football, man, Ashton Hall was unstoppable. He was able to get his team right back to the national championship, where at this point he's looking to establish himself as one of the best players in college football history. And with less than 30 seconds left in the fourth quarter with Clemson down by a touchdown, it was actually Ashton Hall who got them over the goal line for a score, putting up a touchdown for Clemson that officially makes him a back-to-back national champion. From the moment that he stepped on the field at Akron, Ashton Hall had absolutely dominated college football. And after becoming one of the greatest players in its history, after his junior season, he realized that it might be time to move on. Because after 3 exceptional years at the collegiate level, Ashton Hall feels like there isn't much more for him to accomplish in college. So after taking some time to think about it, Ashton Hall had officially decided to enter his name into the NFL draft. And now that Ashton Hall is finally on the precipice of accomplishing his life dream, the last thing he has to deal with before heading to the draft is the NFL Combine. And you better believe that this is something Ashton had been training for his whole life. He went out there and ran a 4.37 in a 40-yard dash, and then went on to put up 18 reps on the bench. He also went out there and did the best long jump in the draft, jumping 11 feet and 4 inches. And a lot of people didn't even notice, but he was actually in the air for 4 minutes on his jump too. But by the end of the Combine, man, Ashton Hall had done excellent, and a lot of the scouts were looking at him as a mid-first rounder. So now all Ashton had to do was just take care of his pre-draft interviews, and he was doing pretty good, man. He went out there and scored a 9 out of 10. He wasn't like Shedeur Sanders in his interviews doing whatever the hell he did to fall to the 5th round. But now Ashton was just hyped for the NFL draft, man, because his dreams were about to come true. He was just sitting up there waiting in the green room before the Las Vegas Raiders told him that they wanted him on the team. This man, Ashton Hall, was taken with the 13th pick in the NFL draft. After walking up to that stage, his dreams had finally come true. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be too long after until reality would set in. Because in the very first meeting that he is ever having with the coach, they're letting Ashton know that the team is weak, and it's going to be a whole process to turn this franchise around. But you know what? Ashton is all in, man. He feels like he could help this team win this season. So back home, Ashton is out there preparing for the preseason. He gotta make sure that he starts eating right going into this year because he has a lot of responsibilities now. He is trying to become a star running back for the Las Vegas Raiders. And now heading into the preseason, Ashton Hall is finally about to get his first NFL action as he's going into his first game against the Minnesota Vikings. Now in this game, although Ashton was doing pretty well early on, it would not take long for him to realize that his offensive line is some doo-doo garbage. And after he goes for another short rush on 3rd down, the coaches decided to take him out for the rest of the game because they felt like he would be ready for the regular season. This game would actually end up in a tie 10-10. But now heading into the regular season, man, Ashton Hall is absolutely ready to go. Like I said before, this is something that he's been training for his whole life. So now heading into his NFL debut, Ashton Hall is looking to make an impact in his very first game against the Los Angeles Chargers. Now to start his NFL debut, this guy Ashton Hall was looking like he was still in college. He was making plays all over the field, even catching passes out of the backfield and coming up with a play that brought his team inside the red zone. And on their opening drive of the season, Ashton Hall would lead this team down to the goal line for a touchdown, putting up the first points of the year as they take the 7-0 lead early on. And Ashton would continue to make his impact felt as a receiver out of the backfield, coming up with a play that went for some big yardage before he tried to hurdle someone and fumbled out of bounds. But he was not the only one fumbling because on 4th down and 1, the quarterback gets clobbered in the backfield, fumbling the ball and giving it away to LA. Now Las Vegas would end up getting some points before half, but after halftime, their offense had stalled out. At one point, the quarterback was out there fumbling the ball again, but luckily Ashton was the one to come up with the recovery as he tried to help save their drive. Ultimately, though, they were not able to pick up a first down. And after Los Angeles goes down the field and takes the lead, the Raiders were now left in a position where they had to score with little time left. And after the quarterback gets sacked on 2nd down, pretty much derailing the drive, the coaches decide to take Ashton out, and that pretty much puts this game away, as Ashton Hall would go on to lose his first game of his NFL career. But he knows that unlike college, this does not necessarily ruin your season. Now, as far as his stats, he actually played pretty well, putting up 44 yards rushing and 98 yards receiving. But after taking a tough loss, Ashton is just focused on mentally preparing for the next week. You see, he is definitely not used to losing after winning back-to-back national championships in college. But now he has to get himself in the mindset that on any given Sunday, anything could happen. And on the following Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens, it was definitely more of the same from the previous week, as the Raiders started this game off with an interception, and on their next drive on 3rd down and 12, they were not able to convert. So things were definitely not looking good for the Raiders, but it did not get better in the second half, as they were already down by 14 and Ashton Hall was getting stopped in the backfield. And by the 4th quarter, with the Raiders trying to establish the ball, someone on the Ravens defense says "Shablaka" to Ashton, forcing him to fumble on 4th down and doing enough to give Las Vegas their 2nd loss in a row. The Raiders would go on to lose this game 21-7. And although Ashton did not do well on the ground, he was still trying to establish himself as a receiving back. But already at this point, man, the vibes were just not good in Las Vegas, and Ashton Hall was not happy with the way things were going. But he knew the only thing he could really do was just keep working, man. So he tried his best to stay locked in and get prepared for his next game, because now the Raiders are finally playing in their first home game of the season. And in week 3, they are set to face off against the Carolina Panthers. Now to start this game, it once again was not going well. Ashton Hall was fighting for his life, but he ended up fumbling and giving it away to Carolina. But you see, Ashton wasn't just going to go out like that again after going down by 7. So on this play, the coaches have him run out the backfield, and he comes up with the catch with a lot of space. He starts running upfield and finds a way to dive in the end zone for a touchdown, putting up some points for the Raiders and tying this game up at 7. Now in the second half, the Raiders would keep a lot of their momentum going. They were moving right back down the field with the help of Ashton Hall, who came up with another reception and an easy touchdown. He had been making catches all day, and for some reason the Panthers still didn't want to guard him. So in the fourth quarter, after Carolina takes the 21-17 lead, they still allowed Ashton Hall to make a big impact as a receiver. And there wasn't much they could do, as he was also having a pretty big day on the ground, as he takes this carry to the end zone for another touchdown, putting up another score that not only gives the Raiders the lead, but does enough to give them their first win of the season. The Raiders would go on to close this game out 27-21. And Ashton Hall had a monster game with 89 yards on the ground, 139 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. And the greatest thing about it is that he wasn't even a crumb. He wasn't even a tiddlywink of the potential that he was striving toward. So going into another home game, he was looking to help his team come away with another win against Deshaun Cosby and the Cleveland Browns. The Raiders had started this game down 7-0, but Ashton Hall was leading them into the second quarter and trying to lead them down towards the end zone for some points. His impact was felt all over this first possession as he led them down to the goal line and hauled in a reception that got him in the end zone for a touchdown. A huge play that tied this game up for the Raiders, and they would definitely need those points after they got stopped all throughout the rest of the half. In the third quarter though, after the Browns turned the ball over, Ashton Hall would start coming up with some big plays on the ground, bringing his team down to the goal line where he trucked some guy across for a touchdown, putting up some points that were starting to give the Raiders some control in this game, because by the fourth quarter they had a chance to put this game away on 3rd and 16. And with one punishing run from Ashton Hall, he had finally done enough to give his team another win on the season, as the Raiders go on to close this one out 14-7. And Deshaun Cosby looks mad that Ashton Hall went for 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. And it's crazy because at this point, Ashton isn't even one of the top rushers in the league, but he is the leading receiver in yards by just 3. He was putting this team completely on his back, and it seemed like the whole league knew it. He was already becoming one of the top backs. And as a rookie, he was gaining a lot of love from the city of Las Vegas. And this was definitely a great feeling for Ashton, but he knew that he had a long season ahead of him. And he had to keep the ball rolling into his next game against the divisional rival, the Denver Broncos. Now this was a game where Ashton Hall was out there absolutely playing his heart out, man, but playing on a team where your own coach is telling you that they're dookie dog water, he wasn't surprised to see that his team was getting penalized a lot, which in turn meant that the offense continued to stall out all throughout the first half. It wouldn't be till later in the second quarter where Ashton would start getting involved as a receiver, coming up with a couple plays that did move the chains for his team. But with the Raiders' offensive line that was looking like this, they were not really having much luck further than that. In the second half though, Ashton Hall would start giving his team some life, even going out there and saying, hey, picking up a big first down. But in a game where the good plays from the Raiders' offense were far and few between, they just were not able to get anything going in this game. And by the end of it, they were taking their 3rd loss of the season. The Raiders would get shut out on the road, and Ashton Hall felt like there wasn't really much else that he could have done. The mistakes did not come from him this game, and at this point he was really just starting to accept that he was a part of a bad team, and he was letting the media know exactly how he felt. Since Ashton Hall started taking football seriously, he hadn't lost so much in his life, and he was growing seriously frustrated following this loss. So after the game, Ashton decided to just go out for a ride with a new car that he got with his NFL money. He wanted to go out and get some fresh air and just recalibrate his thoughts. And he was definitely spinning the wheels on this thing, man. He was out there having a great time. Ashton Hall was out on the road just thinking about ways that he could get the Las Vegas Raiders back on track. But unfortunately, there were some people in the league that knew Ashton Hall's potential, and they were willing to do whatever it takes to make sure he doesn't reach it. So out of nowhere, man, someone cuts in front of Ashton, and he tries to swerve out the way, but he goes off-road and goes off a jump. Someone in the NFL was trying to take out Ashton Hall, and all of a sudden he was flying through the air. And it's crazy because he was actually up there for 4 minutes too. But eventually, he would come down. Ashton Hall was in a crash, but luckily only had minor injuries. Still, the support that he got from around the nation was incredible. People loved Ashton Hall, but unfortunately, he was going to be forced to sit out for at least the next month. Ashton Hall had to not only recover from some of his minor injuries, but the NFL was doing an investigation into who could have done this. So while Ashton Hall was out there working hard to get back healthy, the Raiders were forced to play without him, but luckily they did not do so bad. And eventually, Ashton Hall was ready to make a return to the field. So in a season where he still thinks that he could get 1,000 yards, he's going to try to do that and get his team to the playoffs. But that all starts with his first game back in over a month, as he set to face off against the Denver Broncos. Now the Raiders start this game backed up on their own goal line, but the crowd is going absolutely crazy for a first down run from Ashton Hall. Unfortunately, they would not be going crazy for much longer after they got stopped on third down. And in the second half, it looked like the Raiders were back to their losing ways even with Ashton, up until he started coming up with some big plays to move his team downfield. He brought his team down to the goal line where he eventually made it across for a touchdown, putting this game at now 10-7 for the Broncos. But after pretty much getting the ball right back, Ashton Hall was not playing around with that defense. He was out there making some big plays as a runner and as a pass catcher out of the backfield, coming up with multiple plays that led his team right back down to the goal line towards the end of the fourth quarter. And after this handoff, Ashton is able to dive in the end zone for another touchdown on the day and help his team put another game away, as the Raiders go on to close this one out 14-10, and this actually turns out to be Ashton Hall's best game of his career, going for over 200 yards from scrimmage and 2 touchdowns. An excellent game to come back to after recovery. But now Ashton is putting in some more work going into the next week, because this next game is definitely personal to him. Ashton Hall had a dream that the car that swerved out in front of him had a Kansas City license plate. Now, he doesn't know for sure, but either way, he's going to do his best to take down the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, in this game, man, Ashton Hall let the Chiefs know that he is not playing around. He is coming out here picking up first downs left and right, and eventually this defense realizes that they have to focus completely on him, which ultimately just led to them freeing up the outside, allowing a receiver to go upfield for a touchdown, putting up the first points in this game in the second quarter as the Raiders take the lead. On the road against Kansas City, Ashton Hall was doing a great job establishing the run in enemy territory. This man took his hand off. He was out there saying, "Blocker," steamrolling guys for first downs all throughout the game. By the third quarter, he already had over 100 yards on the ground, but he was still out there making an impact as a receiver, eventually leading to late in the fourth quarter where, with Ashton Hall still not being stopped, a couple more first downs had done enough to give the Raiders another win on their season, as the Raiders would go on to close this game out 16-14. And Ashton Hall has another great game. Although he has no scores, he puts up a ton of yards. And at this point in the season, it's looking like the Raiders might actually get a chance to play the Chiefs for a third time in the playoffs. But with quite a few games left, there is still a lot of work to do. Because I see why they call it a 6 seed, man. They literally got 6 teams fighting for it. So Ashton Hall's back home working hard because he wants to make sure that his team has a chance to compete. But now they got to sit up here and take care of business in their next game against Baker Mayfield and the Bucks. Now in this game, although they were down by 7-0 throughout the majority of the first half, Ashton Hall was getting his team across the goal line for a touchdown to tie it up. And in the second quarter, he continued to be great, except for this one play where he tried to jump over a guy and got suplexed in the air, fumbling the ball and giving it away to the Bucks. But Ashton Hall was still doing his thing in the second half, getting his team across the goal line for another touchdown and eventually leading them into overtime, where on the second down and 10, all the Raiders had to do was just hand the ball off to Ashton Hall, because he takes this one outside and immediately upfield. He gets a block from a receiver before he is sprung loose, and all of a sudden there was nobody that was going to catch him on his way to the end zone, as Ashton Hall scores a touchdown in overtime to give the Raiders a 4-game winning streak. The Raiders would win this one 23-17, and this was easily Ashton Hall's best game of his career, as he went for 158 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns with 90 yards receiving. And at this point, man, he was getting a lot of love from his coaches and his team, and he was just really glad to be receiving the recognition considering all the work that he puts in. Now, the Raiders season would continue into Monday night against the Atlanta Falcons, and unfortunately for the first time in a while, the Raiders were not able to get nothing done. Their offense was so bad they just wanted to see what it was like with Ashton off the field, and lo and behold, it was even worse. So the Raiders' win streak would eventually be snapped as they lose 7-0. And Ashton Hall definitely had his worst game of the season so far, but that's okay, because Ashton Hall still has faith that this team has what it takes to make the playoffs. So with a few games left in the season, he's going to do whatever it takes to get his team there, starting with their next matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars. It took all the way until the end of the second quarter, but finally Ashton Hall was getting across the goal line for a score, putting up the first points of this game as his team takes a 7-0 lead. Now, it would not all be peaches and cream, as the quarterback would throw an interception late in the fourth quarter, allowing the Jaguars to take the lead with less than 2 minutes left. So on the next drive, instead of passing it this time, they decided to run it, and Ashton Hall was breaking loose to the outside. This man was outrunning everybody on the sideline, and the whole stadium was hyped. He ended up diving across the goal line for a touchdown, putting up some points that would do enough to win another game for the Raiders, as they squeaked this one out at home 14-10, and it was largely thanks to Ashton Hall going for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. This man had him in perfect position for the playoffs with 2 games left, and now being well over 1,000 yards on the season, there was no slowing down going into his next game against the Saints. And in this one, by the end of the first half, he was back to making an impact as a receiver, coming up with a reception that put his team across the goal line for the first points in this game. And although he struggled a lot on the ground in this game, by the fourth quarter he was turning it on at the right moment, picking up first downs that allowed Las Vegas to chew out the rest of the clock and put this game away. As the Raiders go on to close this one out 7-3, and just like that, they are now 1 game away from the playoffs. All they have to do now is just win their last game of the season against the team who actually beat them in their first game of the season, the Los Angeles Chargers. Now to start this game off, Ashton Hall was once again doing his thing, but this offensive line like they had all season was starting to become a detriment early. They eventually got to 3rd down and 13 where the quarterback just throws the ball out of bounds, forcing them to punt on their opening possession. Now eventually the Raiders would not only get the ball back, but they would start making some serious moves downfield. With the help of Ashton Hall, they were able to establish a ground game as he got them to the outside and up into the end zone for a touchdown, putting up some points that is giving his team the lead with less than 2 minutes left in the first half, giving his team a lot of momentum in the process, which would stay with them going into the 3rd quarter, as Ashton Hall continued to make plays to move his team downfield. It didn't seem like Los Angeles was going to stop him in this game as he got them across the goal line for another score, making this now a 14-point game going into the 4th quarter. And even though the Chargers would eventually score, they still have to deal with the problem of trying to stop Ashton Hall. And on this 3rd and 6 with a chance to put this game away, they also forgot to stop Brock Bowers, as he picks up a first down that not only does enough to put this game away, but sends the Raiders back to the playoffs. As the Las Vegas Raiders go on to beat the Chargers 14-7, and it was mostly off the back of Ashton Hall, who went for over 130 yards on the ground. He had dominated for the Raiders throughout the season, and the coaches were back in the office letting him know just how proud of him they were. And they were letting Ashton know that they believe in him because he was pretty much their best player. As a rookie, and even with missing multiple games, he was still the 2nd leading rusher in the league. But at this point, man, although the Raiders have already had a successful season, it is now time to move on to the playoffs, where it turns out that Ashton Hall will indeed be leading the Raiders into a 3rd rematch against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now the Raiders actually start this game out with horrible field position, and they were not able to get anything going on their opening possession. Now down by 7, Ashton Hall would start doing his best to pick up some first downs for his team, but at some point it seemed like he was the only one out there trying to make a play as they got stopped again on 3rd down. Now in the second half, still down by 7, Ashton Hall was out there moving the chains for his team. He knew he had to pick it up and try to put some points on the board for his team eventually, but with this offensive line still being the same offensive line as always, it wasn't just going to be that easy. They eventually got to the 4th quarter where the Raiders were still down by 14, and Ashton Hall was out there saying, "Hey," to try and change that, leading them down to the red zone where he eventually came up with a reception and got his team into the end zone for a score. Finally, he was putting up some points for his team halfway through the 4th quarter, and now all he needed was just one more chance on offense to tie this game back up. But as Ashton Hall watched from the sideline, he got to see as the Chiefs worked their black magic, because with 3 minutes left, Patrick Mahomes led his team right down the field, taking up all the time and doing enough to put an end to Ashton Hall's rookie season, as the Raiders never even get a chance to touch the ball again, and they lose this one 14-7. And after the game, man, Ashton Hall is just damn near depressed. He's definitely glad that he was able to get the Raiders back to the playoffs, but he definitely didn't want his season to end to a team that tried to end his career. Now Ashton Hall went on to earn himself not only Pro Bowl honors, but he went on to earn Offensive Rookie of the Year, establishing himself as the next big superstar running back in this league, as he was not only the 2nd leading rusher in the NFL, but also had over 800 yards receiving. But now that his rookie season is over, he was not necessarily excited going into his 2nd season. He had a feeling that the Raiders were not going to be as good, and it turns out that he was right, because about halfway through the season they were 2-5 and sitting at the bottom of the AFC West. And unfortunately for Ashton Hall, despite the fact that he was actually having a pretty good season, it didn't really matter when his team was just not doing what they had to do. And oftentimes they were ruining the big plays that he made to get the team a first down. So after taking a close loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, Ashton Hall went to the front office and told them that he wants to be traded. And after eventually finding a trade partner, the Las Vegas Raiders would ultimately deal Ashton Hall to the Jacksonville Jaguars, trading him for Travis Etienne and a bunch of picks. And now Ashton Hall and Travis Hunter are going to be teammates. But the great part about it is that with Ashton Hall being one of, if not the best running backs in the NFL, everybody had a feeling that he was about to take this team to new heights. And it was not long before he would start making a big impact for this offense, because soon the Jaguars were winning, and they were winning a lot. and it was largely thanks to the fact that Ashton Hall had become the second leading rusher in yards. He had such an incredible season that he not only led the Jaguars to the playoffs, but he would ultimately lead them to the Super Bowl, their first one in franchise history, and they would get an opportunity to win their first ring against the New York Giants. Where early on in this game, man, Ashton Hall and this offense were not playing around. They got the ball out to him on his play, and soon after he was gone, dusting the entire Giants defense as he made his way to the end zone for a touchdown, giving the Jaguars a ton of momentum in this game as they would ultimately go on to win their first ever Super Bowl. Led by Ashton Hall, this team had broken through to a level that they have never seen before. And now Ashton knows for sure that he definitely made the right move of asking for a trade. Because now not only is he a college football national champion, but he is also a Super Bowl champion and a Super Bowl MVP. And all Ashton's life, he was thinking that, you know what, bro, he gotta at least get 10,000. But now, Ashton Hall gonna at least need 20. But this was Ashton Hall's football journey. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to get this one to 1,000 likes and subscribe to the channel down below. Also, be sure to comment down below what else you guys want to see next, and YouTube thinks you'll like one of these other stories until the next one comes out. If you got to this point in the video, just know that I appreciate you more than you'll ever know. I hope you all have a great rest of your week, and other than that, I'm gonna catch you guys next time.